Caleb Mason dropped his saddlebag in the dirt and found himself staring down the barrel of a shotgun, held dead steady by a woman he'd never laid eyes on. 2 years he'd bled on the trail to save his father's ranch. Now smoke, curled from his own chimney fences, stood straight, that should have rotted flat, and this stranger blocked his own front door like she owned the ground under his boots. "Take one more step," she said, "and they'll bury you next to the fence your daddy could never keep standing." Before we go on, subscribe to the channel. Follow this story all the way to the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels tonight. "Lady, that's my house." "Is it now?" She didn't lower the gun. She didn't blink. "Then you'll know how many boards are missing off the east side of the porch. Count 'em out for me." Caleb's jaw worked. "I've been gone 2 years." "Wrong answer." Her thumb rested on the hammer, calm as Sunday. "A man who owns a thing knows its wounds. You don't know a single scar on this place." "Because it was falling into the dirt when I left it." His voice cracked, and he hated that it did. "Because my father was already sick, and there wasn't a nickel to fix a nail, let alone a porch. I rode out on that cattle drive so I could come back and put it right. So step aside." Something shifted behind her eyes. Not fear. Measurement. She was weighing him the way a horse trader weighs a lame animal, deciding what he was worth and what he'd cost. "Your father," she said slowly. "You'd be Caleb then. I'd be Caleb Mason, and you'd be trespassing. Elijah talked about you." The gun came down an inch. Just an inch. "Said his boy went north with the herd and never wrote. Said he figured you were dead in a river somewhere. He said it every night for a year, Mr. Mason, right up until the night he stopped saying anything at all." The words landed harder than any fist. Caleb felt his knees want to go. "He passed. 14 months back. In the room behind me in a bed I keep made because I couldn't bring myself to strip it." Now the gun lowered all the way, and she let the barrel rest across her forearm the way a woman holds something she's done being afraid of. "You want to come in and see where your daddy died, you can. But you take off your hat first, that much he earned." Caleb took off his hat. She was a big woman. He'd registered it the moment he walked up, the way you register weather, and now he registered the rest of it. She filled the doorway, not as a thing to apologize for, but as a fact. Shoulders, square boots, planted the shotgun, looking small in hands that had clearly done more than hold it. When she stepped back to let him pass, she moved without a wasted motion, and Caleb had the strange sense of being permitted onto his own land. "Name's Evelyn Hart," she said. "Wipe your feet. I scrubbed that floor this morning." Inside the ranch was not the ranch he'd left. He'd braced himself for rot, for a caved roof and rats in the meal barrel. Instead, the fire was banked clean, the table-oiled tools hung in ordered rows on pegs that hadn't existed before. A ledger sat closed at the center of the table, thick as a family Bible. A leather cord wound twice around it. "You did all this," he said. It wasn't a question, but he needed her to answer it. "I did all this. Alone." There was no one else offering. She set the shotgun above the mantel where a rifle used to hang. "I came through here 14 months back with a dispute behind me and nothing ahead of me. Your father was 3 days from the ground and too proud to send for help. I stayed to nurse him. When he passed, I meant to move on. But you didn't." "No." She pulled out a chair, sat, folded her hands on the ledger. "I looked at this place he loved so hard, it killed him, Mr. Mason, and I couldn't walk off and leave it to the buzzards. So I mended the fence, then I mended the water line, then the well. Then I bought back 4 head of your daddy's cattle that a neighbor was holding against a debt, and I fed 'em up and I let 'em breed. There's 40 head grazing your south quarter tonight. I counted them at dawn." Caleb sat down hard across from her. "With what money?" For the first time she smiled, and it was not a warm thing. "Now that," she said, "is exactly the right question. And it's the reason you find me holding a shotgun instead of a broom." "I don't follow." "You will." She untied the leather cord, slow, deliberate, the way a woman unwraps a wound she's tended a long time. "You reckon a widow with no name and no standing rebuilt a dead man's ranch on charity and church suppers? I reckon I don't know how." I learned how, Mr. Mason. I learned this whole valley's business because I had to know who to trust and who'd take the roof off my head if I gave them the chance. She opened the ledger. Row after row of her hand tight, and even columns of names and dates and figures marching down the page. And what I learned is that half the ranchers within a day's ride of this door are being robbed blind, and every last one of them thinks it's just bad luck. Bad luck how? Foreclosures that come too fast, land assessed at triple what it's worth, so a man can't pay his tax and loses the deed. She turned a page. Water rights that dry up the same season a bank decides it wants your ground. It's happening to the Delaney's. It happened to the Pruitts before them. It happened to a widow named Cobb, who's washing dishes in Calverton now for the man who took her home. That's the way of things out here, Caleb said. Hard country. Men fail. Men fail. Evelyn's finger came down flat on the page and stopped. But when 11 men fail the same way in the same order and every acre they lose wins up under the same name, that's not failure, Mr. Mason. That's a design. Caleb leaned in despite himself. What name? Langford. She said it the way you'd name a sickness. Victor Langford. The name meant something even to a man 2 years gone. Langford owned the feed store and a piece of the bank. Langford owns the bank now, and the county assessor's office in everything but the deed, and 2 judges' good opinion, and the sheriff's silence, and a stretch of this valley you couldn't ride across in a day. She turned the ledger to face him. Your father knew. That's the part I'd have kept from you if I could. Elijah figured it out before I ever got here. It's why Langford wanted this ranch so bad. Your daddy was the one old bull who wouldn't sell, and a man who won't sell is a man other men look at and think maybe they don't have to sell either. You're telling me my father was murdered. I'm telling you your father was worn down. She held his eyes. There's a difference, and it matters. Langford didn't put a bullet in Elijah Mason. He put worry in him. He called in a note early. He got the water assessment raised. He let it be known around town that any hand who worked the Mason spread would find no work anywhere else in the valley after. Your father died, broke alone and afraid, and every bit of it was arranged. I've got the paper that proves the note was called 2 years before it came due. She tapped the ledger. It's all in here. Every figure. I've been building this since the week he died. Caleb stood, walked to the window, put his hand against the frame he'd helped his father hang when he was 12 years old. Why? He said. You don't owe this place a thing. You could have sold your labor anywhere. Why break your back for a dead man's ground and go picking at a fight with the richest man in the county? The silence behind him stretched long enough that he turned around. Evelyn Hart was looking at her own hands. Because I know what it is, she said quietly, to be a thing people decide isn't worth much. Ma'am, let me finish since you asked. She lifted her chin. I came from a town that took one look at me and made up its mind. Too big, too plain, too much woman and not the right kind. I heard every word they said, and some they didn't have the nerve to. There was a man there who tried to take what little I owned, dressed it up legal, same as Langford dresses his, and when I fought it, the whole town decided I was the trouble. Not him. Me. So I left with a dispute behind me like I told you, and I swore I'd never again stand quiet while a powerful man robbed somebody the law was supposed to protect. She closed the ledger, cord and all. Then I got here and found your daddy dying of exactly that. Reckon God's got a sense of humor. Caleb didn't know what to say, so he said the truth. You saved my ranch. I saved your ranch, she agreed, and I'll hand you every board and every head of cattle and the keys to that front door the minute you can tell me you'll finish what I started. Because I can't do the last part alone, Mr. Mason. A woman like me can rebuild a barn and nobody blinks. But a woman like me stands up in front of the Ranchers Association and says, Victor Langford is a thief, and they'll laugh me out of the valley before I get to the second word. And a Mason saying it with your daddy's name behind you and my ledger under your arm, that's a fight we might win. She stood, and standing, she was near his height, and she did not step back from him the way most people stepped back. So that's my price. Not money. You. I want you in this all the way to the courthouse, or you don't get to play at it. I've buried too much in this ground to watch a tired man quit halfway." The door rattled with 3 hard knocks. Evelyn's whole body changed. She had the shotgun off the mantel before Caleb finished turning, and she moved him behind her with one flat sweep of her arm, an animal instinct to put herself between the door and the last thing worth protecting. "Miss Hart." The voice through the door was smooth, unbothered, the voice of a man who had never once been told no. "I saw a horse I didn't recognize. Thought I'd make sure you weren't in any difficulty." "That's him," Evelyn breathed. "That's Langford. He watches the road." "Open it," Caleb said. "Caleb." "Open the door, Miss Hart." She opened it. The man on the porch wore a coat that cost more than the cattle Caleb had driven north, and he smiled the way rich men smile at people they intend to remove. His eyes went to Caleb, and something flickered in them quick and cold before the smile smoothed it over. "Well?" Langford removed his hat, all courtesy. "I'll be damned. Elijah's boy. We'd all given you up for lost son." "I found my way back." "So you did. So you did." Langford's gaze slid past him into the house, cataloging pricing. "And you've come home to quite a surprise, I imagine. Miss Hart has been a diligent little steward, kept the place from going entirely to seed." He said little the way another man might spit. "Course that raises a question, doesn't it? Because your father passed with debts, Caleb. Real debts on paper at my bank. And a ranch with a dead owner and no heir present. Well, the county's been patient, but patience has its limits." "There's an heir present now," Caleb said. "There is." Langford's smile didn't move. For the moment. He turned that smile on Evelyn, and it curdled. "You should thank Miss Hart. Not many women would work so hard on ground that was never theirs and never will be. It's almost touching. A woman with no prospects clinging to a dead man's house." He tipped his hat to her the way you'd tip a hat to a servant. "You've done fine work, dear. Truly. It'll make the property that much easier to sell." Evelyn didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply looked at him with the flat patience of a woman who was already counting his sins in ink. "You watch the road, Mr. Langford," she said. "You saw an unfamiliar horse and you came running before the man had washed the trail off his hands. I'd think on that if I were the folks in this valley. I'd wonder why a man rich as you spends his evenings watching who rides up to a broke widow's door." The smile finally slipped. Just for an instant. Then it was back harder. "Careful, Miss Hart." He set his hat on his head. "This is a small valley. It has a long memory. And it has never once been kind to women who don't know their place." He stepped down off the porch, then paused, looking back at Caleb. "Come see me at the bank, son. Bring your daddy's papers. We'll settle this like reasonable men before your friend here talks you into something you'll regret." His eyes moved once more to the ledger on the table, and Caleb watched him see it, and watched him decide it was nothing. "Good evening to you both." They listened to his horse fade down the road. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. He looked at the ledger. He looked at a book, Evelyn said, sliding the shotgun back onto the mantel with hands that hadn't trembled once. "He can't imagine a woman like me built something he'd need to fear. That's the crack in him, Mr. Mason. That's the whole game. Every powerful man's got one thing he can't see, and Victor Langford can't see me." She turned. "The question is whether you can." Caleb looked at her a long moment. At the straight fences past the window, and the ordered tools, and the 40 head she'd raised out of 4, and the bed she couldn't bear to strip. At the woman his father had let stay, when he'd have been too proud for anyone else, which told Caleb something about what Elijah Mason had seen in her at the end. "My father let you in," Caleb said. "He didn't let anybody in." "No," she said, "he didn't." "Then I reckon that's answer enough for me." He crossed the room and put his hand on the ledger, and beneath his palm he could feel the sheer weight of everything she'd carried alone for 14 months. "Show me. All of it. Every name, every figure, every foreclosure. If my father died in that back room, afraid, then Victor Langford is going to spend the rest of his life afraid, and I'm going to help you make it so." Evelyn Hart looked at him, and for the first time since he'd walked up on that porch, the hard set of her softened into something that had been waiting a long time to be needed. "All right, Caleb Mason." She untied the cord again and opened the book between them. "Then sit down, because it's worse than you think, and we've got a long way to walk before morning." Outside, the smoke still rose from the chimney of a ranch that should have been dead, and somewhere down the dark road, a rich man was already deciding how to be rid of them both. They sat at that table until the lamp burned low, and by the time Evelyn turned the last page, she'd written. Caleb Mason understood that his father had not simply died. He had been erased the way a man erases a mistake off a slate, careful and thorough, and leaving nothing behind but a smudge where a life had been. "Read me that one again," Caleb said. He pointed at a line halfway down the page, her tight hand cramped into the margin. "The Delaney date. March. 2 years back." Evelyn didn't need to look. She'd carried these figures so long they'd worn grooves in her. Tom Delaney's note came due in March. Same month the county reassessed his west pasture at 4 times what it carried the year before. Same month the creek that feeds his stock went dry 3 weeks early. She tapped each fact down like she was driving nails. "A man can survive one of those, Mr. Mason. He cannot survive all 3 landing in the same 30 days. Tom Delaney signed his deed over to the bank in April and moved his family to his brother-in-law's place in Abilene. His west pasture is grazing Langford cattle right now. And you're telling me the creek went dry on purpose?" "I'm telling you the creek went dry the same week a man named Sutter finished digging a diversion channel 8 miles upstream. On land, Langford bought under a name that isn't his." She turned back 3 pages, found it showed him. "Sutter's the surveyor, or he was. He signed off on every one of these assessments. Every single one. His name is on paper 11 times, Mr. Mason. And every time his name shows up, a family loses their ground, and Victor Langford gains it." Caleb rubbed his eyes. The trail exhaustion had gone straight through him and settled in his bones, and now this on top of it, the slow poisoning of everything he thought he'd come home to fix. "Then Sutter's our man. Sutter's a drunk," Evelyn said flatly. "That's the first thing you need to understand about the men who do this kind of work. Langford doesn't hire the strong. He hires the weak because the weak are cheaper, and they don't ask questions, and when the time comes, they break clean. Sutter did the measuring, but Sutter's conscience has been trying to kill him for 2 years. I've watched him drink himself sick outside the saloon in Calverton more times than I can count. A man doesn't drink like that unless something's eating him. So we go to Sutter. We go to Sutter." She closed the ledger wound the cord. "But not tonight, and not you looking like a corpse that walked home. You'll sleep. There's a bed in the loft I keep for—" She stopped. "I keep it made. You'll use it. Tomorrow we ride into Calverton, and I'll show you the valley you thought you knew, and then we go find a broken man and see if he's ready to stop being broken." Caleb should have argued. A part of him wanted to on principle because a man doesn't like being told where he'll sleep in his own house. But he looked at Evelyn Hart across that lamp-lit table at the plain, unhurried certainty in her, and he found he had no argument in him at all. She had earned the right to give orders under this roof. She'd earned it 100 times over while he was gone. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow." He slept like the dead, and woke to the smell of coffee and salt pork, and the sound of Evelyn already moving in the yard, and for one confused half-second, he was 12 years old again, and it was his mother down there, and the ranch was whole. Then he remembered, and the grief hit him fresh, and he lay in the loft a moment, letting it pass through before he climbed down to meet the day. She had 2 horses saddled. She swung up onto the bigger one, a rangy bay that didn't so much as shift under her weight, and Caleb noticed the ease of it, the way she rode like she'd been born to it. "You said you came from a town," he said as they turned onto the road. "You never said you came from ranching." "I came from a lot of things," she said. "My daddy ran cattle in the nations before the drought took him under. I learned to ride before I learned to read. Then I learned to read better than any man who ever tried to cheat me, and that turned out to matter more." She kept her eyes on the road. "You ask a lot of questions for a man who was pointing me off his land 12 hours ago." and something that was almost a smile crossed her face. We'll call it even. Calverton was a valley town like any other, a wide dirt street and a church and a bank and a saloon, and the kind of quiet that pretends to be peace. But Evelyn made him see it differently as they rode in. She nodded at a storefront with a fresh coat of paint. That was Abner Cole's mercantile. Cole owed the bank $400. Now it's a Langford property, and Cole clerks in it for wages. She tipped her chin at a fenced lot of horses. Pruitt's livery. Pruitt's dead. His widow signed it over rather than fight. Every building she named a wound. By the time they reined up outside the saloon, Caleb felt like he was riding through a graveyard where all the headstones still had paint on them. There. Evelyn nodded toward a man slumped on a bench in the alley beside the saloon hat over his face, a bottle loose in one hand. That's Ellis Sutter, surveyor to the whole rotten enterprise. He looks like he's dying. He's been dying for 2 years. Question is whether we can get him to do it with a clear conscience. She dismounted. Let me do the talking. He knows my face, and he doesn't run from it, which is more than I can say for most in this town. You stand where he can see you're a Mason. It'll rattle him. Good. They crossed to the bench. Evelyn stood over the man until her shadow made him stir, and he pushed the hat back and squinted up at her with red-rimmed eyes. Miss Hart? Sutter's voice was gravel and sour mash. Come to pray over me again. I never prayed over you once, Ellis. I've got no patience for prayer over a man who could save himself and won't. She jerked her head toward Caleb. You know who that is? Sutter looked. It took his eyes a moment to focus, and then Caleb watched the recognition land, watched the color drain out of a face that didn't have much color to lose. That's Elijah's boy, Sutter whispered. Lord God, that's Caleb Mason. It is, Evelyn said. The bottle slipped out of Sutter's hand and rolled, and Caleb watched the man's whole body start to shake. He come back. He come back. Sutter dragged a sleeve across his mouth. I told him he'd come back. I told Langford a man's got a son. The son comes home, but he said no. He said the boy was gone for good. He said... Sutter caught himself, clamped his mouth shut, but it was too late, and all three of them knew it. He said what, Ellis? Evelyn said quietly. Nothing. I said nothing. Caleb crouched down, so he was eye to eye with the man. He kept his voice level, the way you'd gentle a spooked animal. Mr. Sutter, my father died alone in a back room worn down to nothing by debts that were arranged before they were owed. You did the surveys. You know that. You've known it for 2 years, and it's rotting you from the inside. He let that sit. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to give you the one thing that might let you sleep again. A chance to make it right. Sutter's eyes filled. You don't know what he is, Langford. You don't know what he'll do. Then tell me. He'll ruin you. Sutter grabbed Caleb's wrist with a hand like a claw. He'll do to you what he did to your daddy, only faster, 'cause you got no wife, no children, nobody to slow the hurt down. He'll call your note. He'll salt your water. He'll turn every hand and every merchant in this valley against you till you can't buy a nail or hire a boy to dig a post hole. And when you're broke and alone, he'll come to your door smiling and offer you pennies, and you'll take 'em, because pennies'll be all that's left. He was crying now openly, a grown man come apart in an alley. I know, because I helped him do it. God forgive me, I put the numbers on the paper. Then help us undo it, Evelyn said. She crouched too on the man's other side, and her voice was different now, gentler than Caleb had heard it. Ellis, you've been drinking yourself into a grave for 2 years because you can't live with what you signed. I'm giving you a way to live. You come with us, you tell what you know, you show us where the real measurements are, and I promise you this, you will not have to carry it another day. He'll kill me. He might try. Evelyn didn't lie to him, and Caleb understood that was why the man trusted her, because she was the only one who'd never once told him a comfortable thing. But he can't kill all of us, Ellis. Not if we come together. That's the thing he's counting on, that we stay scared and alone. The minute we don't, he's just a man. She held out her hand. Come on, get up out of the dirt. You've laid in it long enough. For a long moment, Caleb thought the man would refuse, would crawl back into the bottle and the shadow of the saloon and stay there till it killed him. Then Ellis Sutter reached up and took Evelyn Hart's hand, and she pulled him to his feet like he weighed nothing at all. "I got the real surveys," Sutter breathed. "The true measurements. I never destroyed 'em. I couldn't. I kept 'em buried in a coffee tin under my floor. Langford thinks I burned everything, but I couldn't do it. Some part of me knew." He wiped his face. "You give me a day. I'll bring you the tin. I'll bring you every last figure. And then God help us all." They rode back with the first crack in Langford's world running quiet behind them, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt since he'd stepped off the trail. Not hope exactly. Something harder and better than hope. Purpose. "You did that," he told Evelyn. "I couldn't have done that. I'd have leaned on him and he'd have folded up and run. You knew exactly how much to push." "I know broken people," Evelyn said, and left it there. Sutter came the next evening, gray-faced and sober, a rusted coffee tin clutched under his coat like it was made of gold. What was inside was worth more than gold. His true survey figures, the honest measurements page after page of them, and set beside the assessments Langford had filed with the county, they told the whole ugly story at a glance. Pastures valued at 4 times their worth. Boundary lines quietly redrawn to swallow a creek or a spring. A whole valley's ground remade on paper to bankrupt the men who worked it. "This is it," Evelyn breathed, laying the true figures next to her ledger, her hands almost reverent. "Ellis, this is the spine of the whole thing. You've given us the proof that the numbers were false. Now we just have to prove who ordered them false." "That's the part you'll die trying to prove," Sutter said. "Langford never put his name to a single order. It all came through." He stopped again, that same flinch, that same fear. "Through who?" Caleb said. Sutter looked at the door like Langford might walk through it. Then he looked at the tin, at the 2 years of poison he'd finally coughed up, and something in him decided to finish it. "Through the bank," he said. "But not Langford's name at the bank. There's a man does his dirty paper, a clerk. Name of Harlan Pace. Pace draws up every foreclosure files. Every reassessment moves every deed. Pace is the hand that signs, so Langford's never has to." Sutter swallowed. "And Pace keeps his own book. I seen it once. He writes down everything, every crooked move, because Pace ain't stupid. Pace knows a man like Langford burns his tools when he's done with them, so Pace keeps a book to protect his own neck. If you want the name on the orders, you don't want me. You want Harlan Pace's private book." The room went very still. "Where does Pace keep this book?" Evelyn said. "In the bank. In his own safe, separate from Langford's." Sutter shook his head. "You'll never get it. Nobody gets in that bank after hours but Pace and Langford. And Pace'd sooner die than give it up, 'cause the second Langford knows that book exists, Pace is a dead man too." Caleb and Evelyn looked at each other across the table, and Caleb saw his own thought reflected in her face. If Pace kept a book to protect himself from Langford, then Pace was not loyal. Pace was afraid. And a frightened man protecting his own neck could be turned if you gave him a better place to stand than the one he was standing on. "Then we don't steal the book," Evelyn said slowly. "We give Harlan Pace a reason to hand it to us." "He won't," Sutter said. "He's too scared. He's scared of Langford." Caleb said, the shape of it coming clear as he spoke. "So we make him more scared of what happens if he goes down with Langford. A man who kept a book to save himself is a man already looking for the door. We just have to show him where it is." Sutter stared at them both like they'd lost their minds. "You're going to get us all killed." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "Or maybe we're going to do the thing that hasn't been done in this valley in 10 years. Maybe we're going to win." She stood, gathered the true surveys, wound them into the ledger. "Ellis, you've done your part, and it was a brave thing. Go home. Sleep sober. Don't touch a drop, because from here on you're a witness, and a witness who drinks is a witness. A lawyer can break. Can you do that?" "I can try. Trying's not enough anymore." Her voice went hard. "Elijah Mason tried. Tom Delaney tried. The whole valley's been trying for 10 years, and Langford's got fat on their trying. I don't need you to try, Ellis. I need you to do. She held his eyes until he nodded, really nodded, something firming up in the man that hadn't been there an hour ago. Good, now go home. When he'd gone, Caleb dropped into the chair and let out a long breath. You scare me a little, Miss Hart. Good, she said, and this time the smile was real. You should be a little scared of anybody worth having on your side. The next morning, trouble came the way Sutter had promised it would, and it came dressed as courtesy. A rider came up the road at a walk. A young man in a clean shirt, with a folded paper in his hand, and Caleb knew before the man reached the porch that it was nothing good. Evelyn knew too. She came out and stood beside Caleb with her arms crossed, and she didn't reach for the shotgun, which somehow made it worse. Mr. Mason! The rider didn't dismount. I'm from the county assessor's office. I'm to deliver this to the owner of record. He held out the paper. It's a notice of reassessment. Your late father's property is to be reevaluated for tax purposes. Assessor will be out within the week to survey the boundaries and improvements. Caleb took the paper. He read it. He felt Evelyn go still beside him. They're doing it already, she said quietly. That's the opening move, Caleb. That's the exact move. First the reassessment. Your ground's worth double on paper by month's end, and your tax with it, and then your father's note gets called against a property that suddenly can't carry it. She looked at the rider. Who ordered this? Ma'am, I just deliver 'em. Who signed it? The rider hesitated, then glanced at the bottom of his own copy. Filed by the clerk. Fella named Pace. Caleb and Evelyn didn't look at each other, but Caleb felt the current pass between them all the same. Pace. The very man. Langford had just sent his frightened clerk to sign the first blow against them, and in doing so had put Pace's name on paper aimed straight at the Mason ranch. Tell the assessor he's welcome any time, Caleb said, folding the paper calm as he could manage. We've got nothing to hide out here. He can measure every inch. The rider looked surprised at that. He'd probably been braced for a fight for cursing or a rifle, or a slammed door, the way men who got these notices usually met them. He touched his hat uncertain and turned his horse and rode off. The moment he was gone, Caleb turned to Evelyn. You look like you swallowed a snake. Because I might have. She was already moving into the house to the ledger. Caleb, this is bad and it's good, and I need you to understand both at once. Bad because they've started the machine on us, and once that machine starts turning, it does not stop, and the clock is running now, whether we're ready or not. But good. She pulled the ledger open. Good because Langford just made a mistake. He sent Pace's name out into the world attached to us. Every other family, the paper came so slow and quiet they never saw the pattern. But we know the pattern. We're watching for it. And the man whose signature is on our death warrant is the exact same man who keeps a book that could hang his master. She looked up at Caleb, and her eyes were bright and terrible. Langford just handed us the string to pull. Now we find Harlan Pace, and we scare him worse than his boss ever did. They rode into Calverton the next day, and Evelyn found Pace the way she found everything, by knowing the valley better than the men who ran it. Pace took his dinner alone at the back of the boarding house every noon, and so at noon, Evelyn Hart walked into the boarding house and sat herself down uninvited, across from a thin, careful-looking man in ink-stained cuffs, and Caleb stood by the door where he could watch the street. Mr. Pace, Evelyn said, you don't know me, but I know your handwriting. Pace's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I don't believe we're acquainted, madam. We're not. But we're about to be well acquainted because you signed a reassessment order against the Mason Ranch 2 days ago, and I've come to tell you what's going to happen to you because of it. Pace set his fork down. His eyes flicked toward the door, toward Caleb, and Caleb saw him do the arithmetic and come up frightened. I file the orders I'm given to file. That's the whole of my position. If you've a grievance with an assessment, there are proper channels. There are no proper channels, Mr. Pace, and you know that better than any man alive because you're the one who built the channels crooked. Evelyn leaned in. She didn't raise her voice. That was the thing Caleb would remember, how she never once raised her voice. I know what you do at that bank. I know you draw up every foreclosure and file every false assessment and move every stolen deed. I know you've done it 11 times. And I know one more thing, Mr. Pace. One thing that ought to make you set down that fork and listen close." She paused. "I know you keep a book." The color went out of Harlan Pace like water out of a cracked jug. "I don't know what You keep a book because you're not a fool, and you know exactly what kind of man you work for. You know that when the ground shifts, Victor Langford is going to look around for someone to bury under it, and you know that someone is you. You've known it for years, so you keep a book. Every order, every date, every name behind the name." Evelyn folded her hands. "Here's what you may not have thought all the way through, Mr. Pace. That book keeps you safe only as long as Langford doesn't know it exists. But the ground is already shifting. It's shifting right now. Ellis Sutter has already talked. The true surveys are already out of the tin under his floor and into hands you can't reach. This is coming down, sir, with you or without you. And when it comes down, there are exactly 2 places you can be standing. You can be standing next to Langford as the man who signed every single crooked page, because your name's on all of it. Mr. Pace, not his, yours, and you can go to prison as the architect of the whole rotten scheme. Or," she let it hang, "or you can be standing next to us as the man of conscience, who kept careful records and turned them over the moment he understood what they meant. One of those men hangs. The other one goes home to his supper. You've got until I finish my coffee to decide which one you are." Caleb watched from the door and thought he had never in his life seen anything as ruthless and as merciful all at once as Evelyn Hart, giving a frightened man a way out of his own cowardice. Pace's hands were shaking now. "You don't understand what he is. If I so much as—" "I understand exactly what he is. He's a man who steals from widows and wears out old men and hides behind clerks so his own hands stay clean. That's what he is. The question, Mr. Pace, is what you are." Evelyn lifted her cup, set it down half empty. "I've got half a cup left. I'd think fast." "Where would I even—" Pace's voice cracked. "If I gave you anything, if it ever came out, it came from me. I'm a dead man." "He'd know. He'd know in a day." "He won't know," Caleb said, speaking for the first time, crossing the room to stand beside Evelyn. "Because we won't move on you. We'll move on him. When the state investigators come, and they're coming, Mr. Pace, this is going all the way to the territorial court. You'll be a cooperating witness who came forward. Protected. Langford will never touch you, because Langford will be in a cell. You'll have done the one thing that saves your neck. You'll have gotten to the truth first." He put both hands flat on the table. "You kept that book because part of you always knew this day would come. Well, it's come. Don't let it find you on the wrong side." The boarding house was quiet around them. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan clattered. Harlan Pace stared down at his cold dinner for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was so low they had to lean in to catch it. "Not here," he whispered. "Not the whole book, not at once. He'd notice pages gone. But I can copy. A page at a time. I've a fair hand. I can make you true copies of the orders that matter, the ones with the dates that prove the notes were called early, the ones that show the money moving to the shell names." He swallowed hard. "There's 4 shell companies, Cattleman's Trust, Valley Improvement, 2 others. They all look like different concerns. They're all Langford. The money runs in a circle and comes home to him, and there's paper that proves it, and I'm the one who filed the paper, and I can copy every page." He looked up, and there were tears standing in his eyes. And Caleb understood that this thin, careful, frightened man had been drowning in his own guilt for even longer than Sutter had. "I never wanted this. I've got a wife. I took the position because it was a good position, and by the time I understood what it was, I was in too deep to climb out. You're right. I always knew this day would come. I used to lie awake and pray it would." His jaw firmed. "Give me a week. I'll bring you copies of everything." "A week," Evelyn said, and finished her coffee. "We'll be here." They walked out into the noon light, and Caleb waited until they were mounted and clear of the town before he let himself believe it. He's going to do it. My God. He's actually going to do it. He's going to do it because he was already halfway out the door and we're the first ones to hold it open for him, Evelyn said. But there was a fierce light in her too, a hunter's light. Caleb, do you understand what we've got now? Sutter gives us the false measurements. Pace gives us the paper trail to the shell companies. Put those two together, and it's not a story anymore. It's not a widow's suspicions or a grieving son's grudge. It's proof. Documented, dated, signed proof that Victor Langford ran a machine to strip this valley bare. She reined up and turned to face him. But we can't stop at two. Two men can be discredited. Sutter's a drunk, they'll say. Pace is a disgruntled clerk with a grudge, they'll say. We need the families. We need the ones who lost their land to stand up and say out loud what was done to them. Because a stack of paper convinces a judge, but a room full of ruined families convinces a valley. And we need both. The families won't talk, Caleb said. They're scared. You said it yourself, that's the whole game, they stay scared and alone. They were scared and alone, Evelyn corrected. Because nobody ever gave them a reason to be brave. Nobody ever stood up first. Well, we're standing up first, Caleb. And the first family we go to, we don't ask them to be brave. We show them the proof. We put Sutter's true surveys and Pace's copies in front of them, and we let them see with their own eyes that they weren't fools. They weren't failures. They didn't lose their land because they were weak. They lost it because a powerful man designed it so they'd lose it. You know what that does to a broken person, Caleb. You know what it does to a man who spent 2 years believing he failed his family when you show him he was robbed. It makes him angry. It makes him dangerous, Evelyn said softly. And this valley has needed some dangerous men for a long, long time. They started with the Delaney's because Tom Delaney was the freshest wound, and because Evelyn had kept up a quiet correspondence with his wife. They rode the long day to Abilene and found the family crowded into 3 rooms of a brother-in-law's house. And Caleb watched Tom Delaney's face when Evelyn laid the true surveys on the table next to the assessment that had ruined him. Watched a broken man read the 2 numbers side by side. Watched him understand for the first time in 2 years that the ground he'd signed away had never truly been worth what they'd charged him against it. That the creek that dried on him had been dried on purpose. That he had not failed. He had been robbed. 4 times, Delaney whispered. He kept touching the false number like he couldn't believe it was ink and not a wound. They valued my west pasture at 4 times. I couldn't pay the tax. I thought it was me. All this time I thought I'd done something wrong, that I'd let it get away from me. You didn't do anything wrong, Tom, his wife said, and she was crying, and she gripped his hand. You didn't. Oh, thank God you didn't. There's a man, Delaney said, and his voice had changed, had gone low and even and hard, and Caleb recognized the change, because he'd heard it come into his own voice 2 nights ago. The change from grief to purpose. There's a man did this to my family, to my children. Made me believe I was the one who failed them. He looked up at Evelyn and Caleb. What do you need from me? Whatever it is, you tell me and I'll do it. We need you to stand up, Evelyn said, in front of the whole valley, at the Ranchers Association meeting in Calverton 3 weeks from now. We need you to stand up and tell what was done to you with the proof in your hand, so the next family finds the courage to stand up too. Can you do that, Tom? I can do that, Delaney said. By God, I can do that. He wiped his face. And I ain't the only one. There's the Pruitt widow. There's old Cobb, whose place became a mercantile. There's the Hendersons out past the ridge. I know where every one of them landed. You get me a horse in a week, and I'll bring you every family Langford ever broke, and we'll fill that meeting hall so full he won't be able to lie his way out the door. Evelyn Hart looked at Caleb across the ruined Delaney kitchen, and Caleb saw in her face the thing she'd been building toward all along. The thing she'd carried alone for 14 months while a valley slept in its fear. Not just proof, not just paper. An army of the wronged waking up. Then it's begun, she said quietly. God help him. It's begun. They rode home under a hard, bright moon, and for a long stretch neither of them spoke, both of them turning over the size of the thing they'd set rolling. It was Caleb who finally broke the silence because a question had been sitting in him since the boarding house, and it wouldn't lie still. Evelyn, when we're done, when it's over, one way or the other. He kept his eyes on the road. What happens to you? What do you mean, what happens to me? I mean, you came here 14 months ago with a dispute behind you and nothing ahead. You've poured everything you've got into a ranch that isn't yours, and a fight that isn't yours for a man you never met, and a valley that'd never lift a finger for you. And when it's over, when Langford's in a cell, and the families have their land back, and I've got my father's ground standing whole again. He made himself say it. Where does that leave you? You just ride off with another dispute behind you, and nothing ahead. Evelyn was quiet a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, stripped of the iron she carried in daylight. I stopped asking myself that question a long time ago, Caleb. Where I end up? People like me don't get to plan very far ahead. You learn to want the work in front of you, and not much past it, because wanting past it just breaks your heart. She looked out over the dark land. This is the first place in my whole life that ever let me stay. Your daddy let me stay when he had every reason not to. And I know it's not mine, and I know when this is over, I'll likely move on the way I always move on. But for right now, I've got a roof and a fight worth having, and that's more than I've had in a long, long time. So I don't ask what happens to me. I ask what happens to them. She nodded back toward Abilene, toward the Delaney's. Turns out that's a better question anyhow. Caleb didn't answer right away. But something turned over in his chest, quiet and sure, and he filed it away for later, because now was not the time. Now there was a fight. The week ran out, and Pace came through. God bless his shaking hands. He met them at the ranch after dark, a leather folio hidden inside his coat, and when he laid the copied pages on the table, Caleb watched Evelyn go through them one by one. And he watched her face change with each page, the way a general's face changes when the maps confirm the enemy is exactly where she guessed. Cattleman's Trust. She breathed, tracing a line of Pace's neat copy. Buys the Delaney pasture in April. Then in June, Cattleman's Trust sells it to Valley Improvement for $1, and Valley Improvement's officers. She flipped a page. Same 3 names as Cattleman's Trust, and all 3 names show up on Langford's own bank filings as his associates. She looked up, and her voice was almost reverent with fury. It's a circle, Caleb, just like Pace said. The land goes in one door under a false name, changes hands 3 times to bury the trail, and comes out the other side sitting under Victor Langford. And every single transfer, every deed, every filing, she tapped the pages, is in Pace's hand. Signed and dated. This is it. This is the whole architecture. There's more, Pace said quietly. He looked ill, but he looked lighter too, the way a man looks when he's finally set down a weight he's carried too long. The last page. Look at the last page. Evelyn turned to it. Caleb watched her read it. Watched her go very, very still. What? Caleb said. What is it? Evelyn didn't answer for a moment. When she did, her voice had dropped to almost nothing. It's a payment, recorded here in Pace's own hand, dated 3 weeks before your father died. She looked up at Caleb, and there was something in her face he'd not seen before, something almost like dread. Langford paid the doctor, Caleb, the doctor who was tending your father in those last months. There's a payment here from one of the shell companies straight to Doc Ferris, and a note beside it in Pace's hand. She swallowed. It says, per VL, see that EM is not overtreated. The room went dead silent. Overtreated, Caleb repeated. His voice didn't sound like his own. What does that mean? Not overtreated? Caleb, what does it mean, Evelyn? Pace answered because Evelyn wouldn't, and because Pace had carried this one longest of all. It means the doctor was paid to let him go, Pace whispered. Not to kill him. Langford was too careful for that, but to not fight for him. To let the sickness take its course a little faster than it might have. To make sure a stubborn old man who wouldn't sell his land didn't recover to be stubborn another season. Pace couldn't look at Caleb. I filed the payment. I didn't understand what it meant at first. By the time I did, your father was already in the ground. I'm sorry, Mr. Mason. God is my witness, I'm sorry. It's the one that's kept me awake more than all the rest." Caleb Mason sat down slowly in his father's chair in his father's house and stared at a copied page that said in a clerk's neat hand that his father had not simply been worn down. His father had been let die, managed into the grave like a line item so a rich man could add one more pasture to his collection. "He wasn't just worn down," Caleb said, and his voice had gone flat and terrible the way still water goes flat before a storm. "You told me he was worn down, made afraid, called notes dried creeks. You didn't tell me this." "I didn't know this," Evelyn said, and she reached across the table and put her hand over his. The first time she had touched him, her strong hand flat and warm over his fist. "I swear to you, Caleb, I didn't know this part. I knew the land. I knew the money. I never knew about the doctor. This is new. This is worse than anything I feared." Her hand tightened. "But listen to me. Listen. This changes what it is. Up till now we had fraud, theft, ruined families. That's prison. But it's the kind of thing a rich man's lawyers can drag out for years and maybe wriggle free of in the end. But this," she lifted the page, "this is murder, Caleb. Slow, careful, paid-for murder. And there's paper that proves it. This is the thing that doesn't just take Langford's land. This is the thing that takes his neck." Caleb looked at her hand over his. Then he looked at the page. Then he looked at Harlan Pace, this frightened little man who had just handed him the truth of his father's death. "Doc Ferris," Caleb said. "Is he still in the valley?" "He is," Pace said. "But Mr. Mason, be careful with him. He's frightened worse than any of us because he knows what he did. He knows he crossed a line no amount of money washes clean." "Then he's exactly like every other man Langford used," Caleb said. And he stood up, and something in him had crossed over into a place there was no coming back from, and Evelyn saw it and understood it because she'd crossed that same place a long time ago. Scared, guilty, looking for a door. "Well, I'll give him one, same as we gave you. But he's going to tell it, in writing, sworn. He's going to put his name to what he did to my father, and then he's going to stand up in that meeting hall next to the Delaney's, and this whole valley is going to learn what Victor Langford really is." He looked at Evelyn. "You said we needed something that takes his neck and not just his land. We just got it. Now we finish it." Evelyn Hart rose to stand beside him, and Harlan Pace looked up at the two of them. The big, plain woman everyone in the valley had dismissed, and the trail-worn son come home to bury his father twice, and something in the clerk's frightened face steadied into resolve. "The meeting's in 2 weeks," Pace said. "Ranchers' Association. Langford himself always presides, sits up front, like a king. Lets the small men bring their small complaints, so he can look benevolent turning them down." A thin, grim smile touched his mouth for the first time. "He'll be sitting right up front, Miss Hart, when you stand up with all of it. He'll be sitting close enough to watch his whole world come apart, and he won't see it coming, because a man like Victor Langford has never once in his life imagined that a woman like you could be the one to end him." "No," Evelyn agreed softly. She gathered the pages, wound them into the ledger with Sutter's surveys, the whole terrible architecture of it, bound in leather in her two hands. "He never has. And that's exactly why he's going to lose." Outside, the wind had come up off the valley floor, and it carried the smell of the land. Elijah Mason had died, refusing to give up, and somewhere across that dark ground, a rich man slept easy in a house built on other men's ruin, not knowing that in a plain ranch kitchen, 2 weeks from his reckoning, the woman he'd looked straight through had just gathered up the whole truth of him and bound it tight and meant to read it aloud before the world. Doc Ferris lived at the edge of Calverton, in a house that had once been fine, and had gone soft at the edges, the way a man goes soft when he can no longer look himself in the eye. Caleb rode in alone at first because Evelyn had counseled it. "A doctor won't fear a woman the way he'll fear the dead man's son," she'd said. "You go first. You put your father's face in front of him. Then I'll come with the paper." So Caleb went first. Ferris answered his own door, and Caleb watched the man's face when he understood who was standing on his step. It was the same look Sutter had given him in the alley, the same look Pace had given him across the boarding house table. The look of a man who had been waiting years for a knock he prayed would never come, and now it had come, and part of him was almost grateful. "You're Elijah's boy," Ferris said. It wasn't a question either. "I am." The doctor stood in his own doorway and didn't invite Caleb in, and didn't shut the door either. Just stood there with his hand on the frame like it was the only thing holding him up. "I wondered if you'd come. When I heard you were back. I've been sitting here 3 days wondering." "Then you know why I'm here." "I know." Ferris's voice broke on the single word. He stepped back from the door, not to bar it, but to open it. "Come in, son, come in. I've been carrying your father around inside me for 14 months, and I am so tired of carrying him alone." They sat in a parlor gone dusty from a wife long dead, and Doc Ferris told it. He told it plain without excuse, and Caleb made himself hold still, and let the man talk even when every word was a blade going in. "Your father took sick in the fall," Ferris said. "It was his heart and his lungs behind it. A hard case, but not a hopeless one. I'd have said with rest and the right care a man his age and his constitution, he'd have had years yet, maybe many years. He was strong, your father, stubborn strong." Ferris's hands twisted in his lap. "Langford came to see me in November. Private. He'd loaned this house against a debt I couldn't pay. I'd made bad investments. I was a fool. I was going to lose everything I had. And he sat in that very chair you're sitting in now, and he told me my debt could disappear. Just disappear like it never was. He only asked one thing of me." The doctor couldn't look at Caleb. "He asked that I not work too hard to save Elijah Mason." Those were near his exact words. "Don't work too hard. Let nature take its course. An old man, a bad heart, who'd question it. Who'd ever question it? And you agreed," Caleb said, and it took everything he had to keep his voice level. "God forgive me. I agreed." Ferris was weeping now openly, an old man come apart in a dusty parlor. "I told myself it wasn't murder. I told myself I wasn't giving him anything to hurt him. I was only not fighting quite as hard as I might. I withheld a medicine that might have eased his lungs. I stretched out my visits. I let him think there was less to be done than there was. And your father, Caleb, your father knew. That's the part that's killed me. Near the end, he looked up at me from that bed and he said, 'You're letting me go, aren't you, Ferris?' He got to you too." And I couldn't answer him. I couldn't say a word. And he just nodded like he'd expected it, like he was past being surprised by what men would do for that man's money. The doctor pressed his fists against his eyes. "He forgave me. That's the worst of it. Right before the end, he forgave me. He said, 'It ain't your doing, it's his, you're just another one he broke.' And then he was gone, and I've had to live every day since knowing that a better man than me forgave me for helping to kill him." Caleb sat very still, and let the grief and the rage move through him like weather, and when it had passed enough that he could speak, he spoke quietly. "You can't give him back to me." "No," Ferris whispered. "God knows I'd trade my own life to. But no. But you can do the one thing that's left." Caleb leaned forward. "You can put your name to what you did. Sworn in writing before a judge who'll matter. You can stand up and tell this valley that Victor Langford paid to have my father let die. You can make sure he did it for the last time." He held the old man's eyes. "My father forgave you, Doc. That was his to give. But redemption's a different thing than forgiveness, and redemption you have to earn. Here's how you earn it. You help me end him." Ferris looked at him a long moment, and Caleb watched something come back into the ruined man's face, some ghost of the healer he'd been before Langford bought his soul for the price of a house. "Bring me the paper," Ferris said. "Whatever needs signing. Bring me a lawyer and a Bible and I'll swear to every word of it. I should have done it 14 months ago. I've been a coward 14 months too long." He stood unsteady and put out his hand. "Your father was a good man, Caleb. The best of the men I failed. Let me help you make it mean something." Caleb took the old man's hand. And when Evelyn came in an hour later with the ledger under her arm, she found the two of them sitting together in that dusty parlor, and she read the whole of it in Caleb's face before he said a word. He'll swear to it, Caleb told her. All of it. The payment, the withheld medicine, Langford's own words, in his own parlor. Evelyn set the ledger down gently because he half expected her to lay into the man to make him feel the full weight of what he'd done. But she didn't. She was gentler than that, and harder. "Doctor," she said, "I've got no soft words for you and I won't insult you with any. You did a terrible thing, but you're about to do a brave one, and in my experience, the brave thing doesn't wash out the terrible one. It just sits beside it and you carry both the rest of your days." She pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "So here's what I need from you, and I need you steady when I say it because a great deal is going to hang on your word being unshakable. When you swear this out, Langford's lawyers are going to come at you with everything they've got. They're going to call you a debtor with a grudge. They're going to say you invented all of it to save your own skin from the murder you committed. They're going to make you out to be the villain and Langford the innocent man you're slandering." She held his eyes. "Can you stand it? Because if there's any part of this story you're shading any lie mixed in with the truth, they'll find it, and they'll use it to break the whole thing open, and every family counting on us loses. So I'll ask you once plain. Is every word of it true?" "Every word," Ferris said. "Before God, every word." "Then we can use you," Evelyn said, and there was no cruelty in it. Only the cold arithmetic of a woman who had learned the hard way that a case is only as strong as its weakest witness. "You'll swear it out before Benjamin Cross. He's a lawyer out of the territorial capital, honest as they come, and no friend of Langford's. I've been writing him for 2 months. He's already halfway to believing me, and your affidavit is the thing that'll carry him the rest of the way." She began unwinding the cord from the ledger. "Now, show me exactly where in this house Langford sat when he made you the offer, and tell me the date as near as you can fix it. Because Pace has a payment recorded 3 weeks before Elijah passed, and if your account and Pace's paper line up on the dates, then we don't have one man's word against a rich man's denial. We have 2 independent records that corroborate each other. And that, Dr. Ferris, is the kind of thing that hangs a man." Over the following days, the thing they'd built began to take on a shape that frightened even Caleb with its size. Evelyn had been right about the families. Tom Delaney rode the valley like a man possessed, and everywhere he went, he carried the true surveys and the story of what he'd learned. And everywhere he went, another broken family sat up out of their long shame and understood. The Pruitt widow came. Old Cobb came still in his mercantile apron, weeping when he saw on paper that the store he now clerked in for wages had been stolen from him by design. The Hendersons came. A rancher named Boyd, whom Evelyn had never even known was one of the wronged, came because he'd heard from Cobb who'd heard from Delaney. And the thing was spreading now, the way fire spreads once it finds dry grass, family to family, quiet and unstoppable. And with each family, the case grew a new limb. Because Evelyn did not simply gather their grief, she gathered their paper. Every family that came, she sat down with, and she went through whatever documents they'd kept. The foreclosure notices, the assessment letters, the deeds they'd signed away, and she matched each one against Sutter's true surveys and Pace's copied filings, and one by one she built a record so dense and so interlocking that Caleb began to understand it could not be dismissed as the grudge of a few sore losers. It was a map, a complete map of a decade of theft, and every road on it led to Victor Langford. "You know what this is," Evelyn said one night, late, the two of them alone at the table with the ledger and its swelling folio of proof between them. Her voice was quiet and full of a wonder that was almost fear. "It's not a case anymore, Caleb. It's history. Somebody 100 years from now could open this ledger and know exactly how a valley got stolen. Every family, every dollar, every crooked page. It's all here. It's the whole truth of this place written down where it can't be burned or bought or scared into silence." She ran her hand over the cover. "Your father died believing nobody would ever know, that his ruin would just be one more forgotten failure in hard country. And instead," she looked up, "instead he's the reason it all comes out. The one bull who wouldn't sell. If Langford had just let him die quiet in his bed, none of this would ever have surfaced. But he had to have this ranch, and he had to have it so bad he paid a doctor to hurry it along. And that greed is the exact thing that's going to bury him. I've never in my life seen a man so undone by his own wanting. Caleb watched her hand move over the ledger, and the question that had been sitting in him since the road to Abilene rose up again, and this time he didn't push it back down. "Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "You generally do. That town you left, the dispute behind you." He chose his words with care. "You told me a man tried to take what little you owned, dressed it up legal same as Langford does, and when you fought it the whole town turned on you, made you out to be the trouble." He watched her face. "That's why you know this so well, isn't it? Not just because you're clever with figures, because it happened to you. You're not just fighting Langford. You're fighting the man who did it to you all over again through him." Evelyn's hand went still on the ledger. For a long moment she didn't speak, and Caleb thought he'd overstepped, reached into a room she'd nailed shut. But then she drew a slow breath and let it out, and when she spoke, her voice had gone to a place he'd not heard from her before, low and stripped of all its iron. "His name was Harmon," she said. "He owned the bank in the town I grew up in, and half the town besides, same as Langford here. Isn't that a thing? Same kind of man in every town wearing the same good coat." She turned the lamp down a fraction, as though the story wanted less light. "My daddy died and left me a piece of ground. Not much. 40 acres and a house. But it was clear no debt on it, and it was mine. And in that town a woman like me owning 40 clear acres was a thing that offended people. A woman who was too big and too plain and too unmarried with no man to speak for her sitting on ground a proper family could use. Harmon offered to buy it. I said no. It was my daddy's. I said no." Her jaw tightened. "So he did to me what Langford does. He got my taxes raised. He got a lien filed against my land for a debt I never owed, some invented thing. And when I went to the county to fight it, the clerk was Harmon's man, and the judge was Harmon's friend. And the whole machine turned against me exactly like it turned against every family in this valley. And I fought it, Caleb. God, I fought it. I taught myself the law out of borrowed books. I learned to read a ledger and a deed and a filing. I stood up in that courthouse, and I made my case a woman alone, no lawyer. And for a while I thought I might even win." "What happened?" Caleb said, though he dreaded the answer. "They took it anyway." Evelyn's voice didn't shake, and somehow that was worse than if it had. "The judge ruled against me on a technicality Harmon's lawyer invented. I lost my daddy's 40 acres and the house I was born in, and there wasn't a thing I could do because the whole system was his, and I was nobody. And then—" She stopped, started again. "And then the town decided I was the villain of it. That's the part that near killed me, Caleb. Not losing the land. I could have survived losing the land. But they turned it around, don't you see? They said I was a bitter, grasping woman who'd made trouble for a respectable man. That I'd brought it on myself with my pride, refusing a fair offer a woman like me, thinking she was too good to sell. They made me the trouble. And I looked around at the faces of people I'd known my whole life, people I'd have helped in a heartbeat, and every one of them had decided I was the one in the wrong." She met his eyes. "So I left, with a dispute behind me, and nothing ahead exactly like I told you that first night. And I swore to whatever God would listen that I would never again stand quiet while a powerful man robbed somebody the law was supposed to protect. And then I walked into this valley, and I found your daddy dying of the exact same disease, and I understood that God had heard me, and he'd sent me here to make good on my oath." She laid both hands flat on the ledger. "So yes, Caleb, you're right. Every page I've written, every night I've sat up building this part of me was fighting Harmon. Part of me was fighting for a girl who lost her father's 40 acres and got called a villain for wanting to keep them. I couldn't save her. But I can save these people. And maybe that's close enough to the same thing that it lets me sleep." Caleb was quiet a long moment. Then he reached across the table the way she had reached across it the night they learned about the doctor, and he put his hand over hers, where it lay on the ledger. "It's not close enough to the same thing," he said. "It's better. because that girl fought alone and lost. And you're not alone anymore, Evelyn. You've got me. You've got Delaney and Cobb and the whole valley waking up behind you. And this time, you're going to win." He tightened his grip. This time the town's going to turn on the right man. Evelyn looked down at his hand over hers, and something moved across her face that she didn't let him see the whole of, and when she spoke her voice had thickened. "Don't make me promises you can't keep, Caleb Mason." "I'm not making a promise. I'm telling you what's going to happen." She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she drew her hand out from under his, gently, and squared the ledger in front of her, because there was a fight coming, and she was not a woman who could afford to sit long in her own softness. "Benjamin Cross arrives in Calverton the day before the meeting," she said businesslike again, but something had eased between them that would not unease. "He's coming to take Ferris's sworn affidavit and to review the whole file before we make it public. If he signs off on it, if he's willing to put his name and the territorial court behind it, then, when I stand up at that meeting, I won't just be a woman with a book. I'll be a woman with a lawyer and a case, and that's a thing this valley can't laugh off." She began gathering the pages. "But Caleb, I want you braced for something. Between now and that meeting, Langford is going to move against us. He has to. He watches the road, remember. He knows you're back. He knows I'm still here. And by now he's surely heard that Delaney's been riding the valley stirring folks up. He doesn't know how much we have. But he knows something's wrong, and a man like Langford does not sit still when something's wrong. So watch yourself. Watch the ranch. And whatever he tries, because he'll try something, do not let it rattle you off the plan. The meeting is where we win. Everything before it is just him thrashing." She was right. She was right within 3 days. It came in the form of the sheriff, a heavy, uncomfortable man named Dobbs, who rode out to the Mason Ranch with 2 deputies and a paper, and Caleb watched him come and knew before he reached the gate that Langford had made his move. Evelyn came out to stand beside Caleb, and this time she did have the shotgun held low and easy at her side, not raised, just present. "Caleb Mason." Dobbs didn't dismount. He looked like a man doing a job he hated. "I got a warrant here for the arrest of Ellis Sutter, and I got reliable information he's been seen out at this property." "Sutter's not here," Caleb said. Which was true. Evelyn had moved the surveyor to a cousin's place 2 counties over the moment they had his tin precisely against a day like this one. "Warrant on what charge?" Evelyn said. Dobbs shifted in his saddle. "Fraud. Falsifying county survey records over a period of years." He had the grace to look ashamed as he said it, because every man in the valley knew who had ordered those surveys falsified, and it was not Ellis Sutter's idea. "Seems the county's discovered some, irregularities in the old assessments. Sutter's name's on all of them. They want him for it." And there it was. Caleb felt the cold cleverness of it settle over him like a shadow. Langford had gotten wind that Sutter had turned, and rather than silence the man with a bullet, too crude, too traceable, he was going to have Sutter arrested as the sole author of the fraud. Pin the whole decade of theft on the drunk surveyor, the weak man, the one who'd break clean. Let Sutter hang for it, and Langford's own hands stay clean, and any testimony Sutter gave from a jail cell dismissed as the desperate lies of a guilty man trying to spread his blame. "That's smart," Evelyn murmured low, just for Caleb. "God, that's smart. He's getting ahead of us. If Sutter's arrested as the mastermind before the meeting, his testimony's worthless. A convicted fraud pointing at Langford is just a criminal begging for company." Then, louder to Dobbs, "Sheriff, you know as well as I do that Ellis Sutter never ordered a single one of those assessments. He did the measuring. Somebody told him what numbers to write. You know whose office those orders came out of." Dobbs wouldn't meet her eye. "I go where the warrant says, Miss Hart. I don't write 'em, I serve 'em." "Who swore out the complaint?" Caleb said. "County did." "Which man in the county sheriff? A warrant needs a complaining party. Whose name is on it?" Dobbs's jaw worked. For a moment Caleb thought he wouldn't answer. Then the sheriff, who was a weak man but not it, turned out an entirely rotten one, said quietly, "Harlan Pace filed it. Bank clerk, acting for the county. Caleb and Evelyn went very still, and Caleb felt the ground tilt under him. Because Pace was theirs. Pace had turned. Pace had spent a week copying out the very documents that would hang Langford at terrible risk to his own neck, and now Pace's name was on a warrant to arrest and destroy their key witness. "That's not possible," Caleb said before he could stop himself. Dobbs shrugged, misreading him. "Clerk files what he's told to file, same as me." He gathered his reins. "You see, Sutter, you tell him to come in peaceable. Warrant's a warrant. And Mr. Mason." He paused, and for just a moment, the man behind the badge looked out at Caleb, tired and unhappy, and trapped in a job that had long ago stopped being about justice. "Was I you, I'd be real careful the next couple weeks. That's not sheriff talk. That's just a man to another man. Careful." Then he turned his horse and rode off with his deputies and left Caleb and Evelyn standing in the yard with a new terror between them. "Pace filed it," Caleb said. "Evelyn, Pace filed the warrant on Sutter. Has he turned on us? Was it all a game? Was he playing us for Langford the whole? No." But Evelyn's face had gone hard, and thinking the way it went when she was running figures nobody else could see. "No, think Caleb. Think about the man we sat across from in that boarding house. He was terrified. He copied those pages with his hands shaking. A man playing us wouldn't shake." She started pacing the shotgun forgotten in her hand. "There's another answer, and it's worse, and it's better both at once. Langford ordered the warrant filed. Pace is the county's filing clerk. Every warrant, every foreclosure, everything goes out under his hand. That's his whole function, remember? So when Langford said, 'File a fraud complaint against Sutter,' Pace had no choice but to file it. If he'd refused, if he'd balked even a little, Langford would have known something was wrong with his clerk. Pace had to file the very warrant meant to destroy our witness, or blow his own cover and get himself killed." She stopped pacing. "Which means Pace is in an impossible spot right now, Caleb. He's just been made the instrument of the thing he's risking his life to stop. And he had to smile and do it. Can you imagine carrying that? So what do? We get to Pace before he breaks," Evelyn said grimly. "Because a man in that position torn that hard doesn't hold long. Either he cracks and confesses everything to Langford to save himself, or he cracks the other way and does something desperate. We need to reach him and steady him. And we need to move up everything. That warrant means Langford's clock is running faster than ours now. He's going to arrest Sutter, pin the fraud on him, and clean the board before the meeting. We can't let Sutter be taken, and we can't lose Pace." She was already moving toward the barn toward the horses. "Saddle up. We ride for Calverton now tonight. We find Pace, and we find him before Langford does, because if Langford's testing his clerk with warrants, it means he's starting to wonder about him. And a man like Langford doesn't wonder about somebody twice." They rode hard into the dark, and Caleb's mind churned the whole way. Every step forward they'd taken Langford had a countermove. Sutter turns Langford moves to arrest him. Pace turns Langford unknowingly uses Pace as his own weapon. The families gather, and surely Langford was hearing of that too, and surely he had an answer forming for that as well. It was like fighting a man in the dark who could see and you could not. "He's always a step ahead," Caleb said as they rode. "Every time we move, he's already moved." "He's not ahead," Evelyn called back over the wind. "He's reacting. There's a difference, and it matters. A man who's ahead is calm. A man who's reacting is scared. And a scared man makes mistakes, and Langford's already made two. He sent that sheriff out to warn us, as much as to serve a warrant. Didn't you hear it? Caleb Dobbs told you to be careful. That's a lawman who's not sure his master's the man he ought to be serving. That's a crack. And the warrant itself is a mistake because it tells us exactly what Langford's afraid of. He's afraid of Sutter's testimony, which tells us Sutter's testimony is worth protecting at any cost." She leaned low over the bay's neck. "He thinks he's cleaning the board. He's actually showing us his whole hand. Ride, Caleb. Faster." They found Pace's boarding house dark, and Caleb's heart went to his throat, but Evelyn led them around the back to the alley, where the clerk took his air of an evening, and there he was. Harlan Pace, sitting on an overturned crate in the dark, his head in his hands, a man at the very edge of himself. He startled up when he heard them, and in the faint light Caleb saw his face was wrecked, ashen, and wet. "You," Pace gasped. "You shouldn't be here if he sees you talking to me. He filed the warrant through you," Evelyn said, quiet and steady, crouching down in front of the crate to bring herself level with the shaking man. "We know Harlan. We know he made you file the paper on Sutter. We know you had no choice." Pace made a sound that was half a sob. "I had to. He stood over my desk and told me to draw it up, and I drew it up, the warrant to arrest the one man brave enough to, and I had to smile and say, 'Yes, sir, right away, sir.' And all the while I'm thinking, I'm the one who gave you the proof that hangs him, and now he's got me arresting the witnesses, and if he ever finds out, if he ever—" His voice climbed toward panic. "I can't do it. I can't keep doing it. Every day he's got me signing something worse. Today Sutter, tomorrow maybe you. I'm going to break Miss Hart. I can feel it. I'm going to say something wrong, or he's going to see it in my face. And then I'm a dead man, and my wife's a widow, and all of it for nothing. Harlan." Evelyn took the man by both shoulders, firm grounding him. "Look at me. Look at me. You are not going to break because you're not going to have to hold much longer. Listen to me now. The meeting is in 11 days. Benjamin Cross arrives in 10. In 11 days, this is over one way or the other, and you don't have to survive a year of this. You have to survive 11 days. Can you give me 11 days? He's going to arrest Sutter before then. He'll have his mastermind in a cell, and my witness will be worthless. Sutter's safe. He's not where any warrant can reach him. Dobbs can ride out to that ranch every day for a month and find an empty loft." Evelyn's grip tightened. "You just keep doing exactly what you've been doing. File what he tells you to file. Smile and say yes, sir. And copy me one more thing. Harlan, the most important thing of all. That warrant. The fraud complaint against Sutter. I want a copy of it in your hand with the date, and I want you to note down that the order to file it came direct from Langford. Because do you see what he's done? He's put it on paper, Harlan. He's created a document that shows him moving to frame an innocent man to cover his own crime 11 days before we expose him. He's handed us the proof of the cover-up. It's the single most damning thing in the whole file, and he made you write it." A fierce light was in her now. "He thinks he's burying Sutter. He's actually confessing. Give me that copy, and give me 11 days, and I swear to you on your wife's life and mine, you walk out of this a free man, and Victor Langford walks into a cell." Pace stared at her, this drowning man being handed one more time a rope by the only person who'd ever offered him one. And Caleb watched the panic in his face slowly steady into something else. Not courage exactly. Pace would never be a brave man. But resolve. The narrow, desperate resolve of a weak man who has finally seen that his only road out runs straight through the thing he's most afraid of. 11 days, Pace whispered. 11 days. I'll copy the warrant tonight. I'll bring it to the usual place. He wiped his face with a shaking hand. God help me. God help all of us. Then he looked up at Caleb, and something almost like dignity came into his ruined face. Your father, Mr. Mason. Elijah. I filed the foreclosure notice on his ranch. My hand. I want you to know I've hated myself for it every day. And I want you to know that when I stand up and it all comes out, when they ask me why a man would risk his neck to bring down his own employer, his voice steadied. I'm going to say it was for Elijah Mason, the one man in this valley who never sold. Let that be the reason on the record. Let that be worth something. Caleb couldn't speak. He reached down and gripped the clerk's shoulder hard, and the two men held each other's eyes in the dark, and something passed between them that didn't need words. Then Pace rose off his crate, squared his thin shoulders, and slipped back into the dark boarding house to spend one more night in the service of the man he was going to destroy. They rode home slower than they'd come. Both of them wrung out, and the moon was down, and the valley was black around them, and for a long time neither spoke. It was Evelyn who broke it, and her voice in the dark was tired and low and more honest than Caleb had ever heard it. 10 days I've got to hold all these frightened men together, she said. Sutter hidden 2 counties over, drinking himself sober out of sheer terror. Ferris rattling around that dusty house waiting to swear out the worst thing he ever did. Pace at that bank every single day with a noose he tied himself around his own neck. Delaney and Cobb and a dozen families I've promised justice to, when all I've truly got is a book and a lawyer who hasn't even arrived yet. She let out a long breath. You want to know the truth of it, Caleb? Any one of them could break. Any one of them any day could get scared enough or drunk enough or desperate enough to run to Langford and trade the rest of us for their own safety. That's how these things fall apart. Not because the powerful man is strong. Because the frightened people he's wronged are frightened, and fear is the most fragile thing to build an army out of. Then how do you hold it? Caleb said. How do you keep it from falling apart? Evelyn was quiet a moment. You don't hold it with fear, that's certain. Fear's what Langford uses, and it works right up until it doesn't. You hold it with the other thing. She looked over at him in the dark. You hold it by making every one of those frightened people believe that this time this one standing up is going to work. That the man who's terrorized them their whole lives is finally actually going to lose. It doesn't matter how good the proof is if they don't believe. And it doesn't matter how scared they are if they do. Belief is the whole war, Caleb. The paper's just ammunition. Belief is whether anybody's got the nerve to fire it. She faced forward again. So that's my job these next 10 days, not the ledger. I've got the ledger. My job is to ride from frightened man to frightened man and pour belief into them faster than Langford can pour fear back out. And I'll tell you honest, I don't know if I can do it. I've never held this many people together before. Last time it was just me, and I couldn't even hold myself. You're not just you this time, Caleb said. You keep forgetting that. I'm trying not to, she said softly. It's a new thing for me, Caleb. Having somebody beside me. I keep reaching for the weight of it and finding it lighter than I expect. It'll take some getting used to. Then, before the moment could soften too far, she straightened in the saddle, and the iron came back into her voice. 10 days. We use every hour. Tomorrow we ride to steady Delaney and make sure he hasn't lost his nerve stirring up the families. Day after we go to Ferris and drill him on his account, till he can give it in his sleep, because Cross is going to test him hard and I want him unbreakable. Every day between now and that meeting, we shore up one more piece of this thing. And we watch our backs the whole while, because Langford's clock is running as fast as ours now, and a cornered man is the most dangerous kind there is. They came up on the ranch at last, the dark shape of it against the stars, the fences she'd mended standing straight. The ground Elijah Mason had died, refusing to give up lying quiet under the night. Caleb reined up at the gate and looked at it, at the improbable living wholeness of the place, and then he looked at the woman beside him, who had wrought it out of ruin with her own 2 hands, and he understood something with a sudden and total clarity that near stopped his breath. He was not going to let her ride off when this was over, not with another dispute behind her and nothing ahead. Whatever happened at that meeting, whatever became of Langford and the valley and the case she'd built. Caleb Mason had already decided, sitting his horse at his father's gate in the black hour before dawn, that the one thing that would not happen was Evelyn Hart leaving. But he didn't say it. Now was not the time, and he was learning from her how to hold a thing until its right moment. So he only swung down and opened the gate for her, and she rode through it into the yard she'd saved, and he closed it behind them both, and above the mended roof of the house the smoke had long gone cold. But come morning she would light it again, the way she'd lit it every morning for 14 months, keeping alive a fire in a dead man's house that no one had asked her to keep, until the day the truth she'd bound in leather could finally be read aloud before them all. Benjamin Cross arrived a day early, and that nearly undid everything before it began. He came into Calverton not by the road, but by the afternoon coach from the territorial capital, a lean gray man in a lawyer's black coat with a leather case chained to his wrist, and he took a room at the boarding house under his own name, because Benjamin Cross was the kind of man who had decided long ago that hiding was a habit that ate at the soul. Evelyn had wanted him to come quiet. She'd written him twice about coming quiet. But Cross came the way Cross did everything, straight down the middle of the street. And by supper, the whole town knew a territorial lawyer had taken a room, and by the time Evelyn and Caleb reached him, it was full